Hello, this is Daniel, and today I want to show you 3 mistakes that you can make when you're setting up your VentGrid, how to avoid those mistakes and save yourself the time that you could have wasted otherwise. So let's dive right in. Mistake number 1, not planning out the temperature range and the number of steps over which you want your VentGrid to act. So when we hop into our VentGrid main settings here, you can see we've got our start temperature and our bandwidth. And those 2 settings work together to tell us the temperature range over which our VentGrid will be acting. So in this instance, start temperature of 71 and a bandwidth of 10 means that I will be starting at 71 degrees and going to 81 degrees. And over those 10 degrees, I will have 1% up to 100% ventilation. Now, you can go over 100% ventilation in your VentGrid, but I like to cap it out at 100%. That way, when I'm looking at the tile, it's very clean, it all makes sense, and I know we're at minimum ventilation if I see a 1% there, we're at maximum ventilation if I see 100%, etc., etc. It just makes it easy, keeps things simple. So what we need to do is figure out, again, our start temperature. That's going to be the minimum start temperature of our first step. And then our start temperature plus our bandwidth, that's going to be the temperature of the stop for our last step in our VentGrid. Once we've got that figured out, we can enter in these values, and then we'll actually have to hit save to save these values here. And then we can go back into our VentGrid and into the settings. Once we're in the VentGrid, ideally we would know exactly how many steps we're putting into that temperature range. And here's why. If, for example, I would put in my 5 steps, you can see we're going from 1 to 100%, and then I decide, actually, I need a 6th step to actually run things exactly how I want to. Well, I can add that step, but now we're up to 118%. And so to get everything back down so that my final step is at 100, I'm going to have to edit all of these set points, and so I can bring this final one down to that 81 degrees so that my full VentGrid is only running to 100%. That's a lot of rework. The other thing is if I needed to change my bandwidth for some reason. If I didn't plan it out, I thought, yeah, 10 degrees, that's probably enough, and then started programming, decided, actually, you know what? I more like need 15 degrees. Well, you can adjust it, but then it'll change all of your set points here. It'll change all these set points and not necessarily how you want them to be. So you may have to go back again, edit all of your set points that you already went and created, edit them to have it running how you want. So in the end, to save yourself time, to make sure that you're not having to redo your set points, figure out from the start, what is your start temperature? What is your stop temperature going to be so that you know that start temperature and bandwidth value? And then how many steps are you going to use? That way you can set it up once, set it up correctly, don't have to redo any work. The second mistake you can make when setting up your VentGrid is not programming it as you go. So again, planning is crucial. Let me wipe out this VentGrid and I will show you what happens when we add a new line. So at the start, when we add a new line, it's all zeros. Our curtains go up by 5. If I'd add a new line, it copies what's on top, right? It copies and then it adds 5. So if I were to just add my 6 steps and then, I set up my set points for all of them exactly how I want. And then I start going in and I start setting up right? My idle ventilation, what I want my minimum ventilation to be, how I want my fans to ramp, right? I've got to wait. The spinners move, decently fast, but you got to wait for it to go and go and go. And okay, we're at 100. Now, oftentimes we're going to build on what the previous step had. And so, really, if I just delete these guys, it's going to be a lot quicker for us if we program in our whole first step and then copy over. And hey, look, if I want this guy at 100, I started at 30, so it's a lot quicker, right? I saved myself that time rather than scrolling up from 0. I'm scrolling up from 30. And my second one, it's already at 100. It didn't start at 0 like it would have if I just created all my steps blank from the start. So that's a little trick just to save yourself a little bit of time as you're programming in your VentGrid. The third mistake that you can make will also save you a little bit of time. And this mistake is keeping curtains that have the exact same settings, keeping them separate. So let's say here, I know it's called curtains and inlet number 1, but let's say that we want them to have the exact same settings all the way through. Well, as they are right now, I'm going to need to set those settings individually for both of them. That takes some time. If I go into my settings here, I have what we call actuator ventilation grid groups. So I've got a couple of groups here that have already been created. You can delete groups. If you need to get rid of old ones that you're no longer using, you can create a new group. Look at this, we got test group, and I can add this equipment that I've called curtains into that test group. You can see the icon changes, and then the inlet, we can also add that into the test group, and boom, it shrinks it down to a single column. Now we can set the settings just once. If we go in here, we can see we've got both those pieces of equipment operating off the same settings. And if for some reason you ever want to split it out again, it's as simple as that. Save, and look at that. We can adjust the settings and have unique settings again. So those are 3 different tips on how you can plan ahead and program your VentGrid properly to save you a little bit of time. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and I'll see you guys in the next one.